Hey guys, Dreddy MTG here, bringing you a deck tech and a sideboard guide for Black-Green Insidious Roots in Pioneer. This video is going to be a little shorter than I intended because I just spent an hour and a half recording and the file corrupted, so I can't be bothered talking for another hour and a half. So you guys are going to get what you're going to get here. So I'm just quickly going to run through the deck and the main combo, and then I'm going to explain the sideboard. In terms of my credentials with the deck, I top-aided a Magic Online RCQ last weekend with the deck Pioneer Super Qualifier. We had 254 players, and I got knocked out in the quarterfinals of this one. Sadly, it was top 4, got the invite to the regional championship, so just one round short of making it, but I was still pretty pleased with myself getting to the top 8 against some tough competition as always on Magic Online. And doing it with kind of a fringe deck is always nice. I didn't make this deck by any means. There's a couple of players that have been playing it on Magic Online. I tweaked the list a little bit, but I certainly can't take any credit. But I'm good enough to explain what's going on to you guys. So, Insidious Roots, 2-mana artifact. Creature tokens you control have tap, add a mana of any color, and whenever one or more creature cards leaves your graveyard, you create an 0/1 green plant, then put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control, right? So ways we're getting the creatures out of the graveyard. Forsaken Miner, whenever we commit a crime, which is targeting your opponent or any of their stuff or anything in their graveyard is committing a crime, you may pay a black mana to return Forsaken Miner from your graveyard to the battlefield. So a lot of stuff in the deck does that. Scrap Heap Scrounger, classic standard all-star, 32 copies in the Pro Tour. Top 8, one of the few cards that's ever done that. This is pay 1 on a black, exile another creature card from your graveyard, return it to the battlefield. And it's a 2-mana 3/2 that can't block. So that actually creates 2 plants with Insidious Roots, because even though this says whenever one or more, so that means that, one or more things leaving still just gives you 1 plant. These are separate instances, because the first thing is getting exiled as part of the cost for Scrap Heap Scrounger's ability, and then Scrap Heap Scrounger leaving is happening on Revolution. So there's actually 2 triggers for Insidious Roots. So this card is an all-star in the deck. Bloodsoaked Champion, another standard all-star from what I remember. This guy is just like a much worse Forsaken Miner. Has Raid, so if you've attacked this turn, you could pay 2 mana to return it to the battlefield. It's a 1-mana 2/1. It's also just another 1-mana body, which are kind of important in this deck when you're playing Priest of the Forgotten Gods and stuff like that. But this guy's a lot weaker than Forsaken Miner for sure. Now, speaking of All-Stars, this is one of the Pioneer decks that gets to play 4 copies of Deathrite Shaman. Very rare. Banned in Modern, banned in Legacy, staple in Vintage in the Sultai mid-range deck. But mostly goes unplayed in Pioneer because fetch lands aren't a thing. But this combo deck is the perfect place for it. All its abilities count as committing crimes if you use them on your opponent's graveyard, which is pretty nice against things like Phoenix, for example. Exiling their Phoenixes from the graveyard, exiling their spells to stop them delving, getting extra mana, stuff like that. And it's pretty reasonable against other decks too. But it's just great for getting Forsaken Miners back. That also triggers our 2 copies of Kervik, which we have in the deck. This is just kind of a top-end value card, not too important to the combo, but it does rebuy you Insidious Roots copies and stuff in the late game. Kervik says, whenever you commit a crime, exile up to 1 target black card from your graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy. If you do, you lose 2 life. So that just lets you rebuy a Tyvar or Insidious Roots in the late game, or just recast a Fatal Push or something like that. Could be pretty nice. Just buy time by recasting a Stitcher Supplier, right? This also, if you exile a creature, you are, even if you choose not to cast the copy, you can still, when you commit a crime, exile the card from your graveyard, and that will trigger Insidious Roots if it's a creature. So it's another way to get Roots triggers. But Deathrite Shaman, definitely a good one. And Yeah, Fatal Push, no explanation needed for Fatal Push. We are kind of a slightly awkward creature combo deck that needs a few turns to set up, so we need to stay alive. So this could be Thoughtseize in the main, this could be Fatal Push in the main. You can think about that yourself when you're building your list. But for me, I think Fatal Push is just pretty clearly better, you know. Thoughtseize against aggro is not really where you want to be, and against aggro, which is a decent amount of the meta at the moment, these slick shot decks, you just want to be able to kill one or two of their creatures, and then you can stabilize and combo off. So for me, I think Fatal Push is a better main deck conclusion. Scrap Heap Scrounger, I've already explained. Fiend Artisan, as I tweeted after I top 8'd the tournament, I think this is probably just a cut from the deck. I think it's not very good, but I decided to go over the list I top 8'd with, just because I thought that's what people would be interested in. At the moment, I would cut these for, I'm not really sure. I tried Smuggler's Copters in the list, because that's obviously great with Forsaken Miner and Scrap Heap Scrounger. I think 2 copies of Smuggler's Copter is what I'm happiest on. But these could be, you know, could be a Scavenging Ooze, could be a Satyr Wayfinder, could be any other kind of cheap graveyardy creature like that. Not really sure. But this card is totally fine too. If you want to play with this card, if this is always a cool card you've thought you wanted to find a place for, it's certainly serviceable in this deck. It just didn't feel like a superstar to me over the course of the 10 rounds. Priest of the Forgotten Gods, this is kind of the core combo creature of the deck. So for anyone who doesn't know, 1 and a black, 1/2, human cleric, and its ability is tap and sacrifice 2 other creatures. Any number of target players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. You add black and draw a card. So at its baseline, just kind of does what it always does. Pretty good ability. Obviously, we have creatures to recur and Scrap Heap Scrounger, Bloodsoaked Champion, Forsaken Miner, stuff like that. But this really combos with Forsaken Miner, because if you sacrifice Forsaken Miner or just have one in the graveyard, this counts as committing a crime when you target your opponent with the ability. And if you sacrifice Forsaken Miner to the ability, it's then in the graveyard, because it's part of the cost, to see the crime being committed as the ability gets put on the stack. And then if you have a black mana available, you can bring this back before the ability even resolves, which is just excellent. So that counts as obviously a creature leaving your graveyard for Insidious Roots. Now, one thing to note, if you don't have a black mana available, you can't bring the Forsaken Miner back, because the Forsaken Miner trigger is going to go on the stack in response to the Priest trigger. So you won't have the black mana yet by the time you have to resolve the Forsaken Miner trigger. So remember that. So the first time, at least, that you use the Priest ability, if you start comboing, then you'll have the black mana. But the first time, at least, you need that extra black mana available to bring back this Forsaken Miner. Then the last cards we haven't talked about are Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Just this is what lets you go infinite and win the game. This will be responsible for a lot of your wins. Also a great game 1 card against, say, Phoenix. You know, this is alongside Deathrite Shaman is just another good hate card for Phoenix. Giving stuff Fiend Artisan's ability might come up sometimes. Giving creatures Deathrite Shaman's ability certainly comes up, but it's mainly here for Priest. But it also triggers Insidious Roots. You get rid of any creature from your graveyard, it's going to trigger Roots. And very importantly, all your plants from Roots are always going to have +1/+1 counters on them. So they're always going to have all the abilities from Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So for anyone who's not familiar, I mean, this card is completely absurd. 2 mana legendary artifact. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. That's quite funny with Deathrite Shaman. It comes up if you don't, because this deck can actually become quite stretched on green sources, but you can use a black mana to, or a colorless mana even with Llanowar Waste to avoid paying a pain to activate the green ability, for example, or the other way around, but that's what's more likely to come up. But just people think that's flavor text, but it's a real thing. The second ability it has, creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And then finally it has tap, exile target card from a graveyard. So that counts as committing a crime, by the way, if you target your opponent's graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So basically, you exile a creature card from your graveyard, usually trigger Insidious Roots. If it's a priest, you put the priest under it. Now you put a counter on something, and all your creatures have the abilities of all the cards under it. And this is how you win the game, usually. So the last card that enables this is Tyvar, Jubilant Brawler, another busted 3-mana planeswalker of the kind we love to see over the last few years. It has it costs 1 green black, 3 loyalty. It's a Tyvar, and it has the static ability: you may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. So that's what enables the combo turns here, as you'll see in a second. And its abilities, which are very reasonable also, are +1, untap up to 1 target creature. So Deathrite Shaman and Priest of the Forgotten Gods. This is pretty good. You're not really going to use it with Fiend Artisan because the Fiend Artisan ability also costs mana, so that's just not really going to come up. And then his other ability is -2, mill 3 cards, then you may return a creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So obviously we have a bunch of hits for this, and whatever comes back, we're going to be able to activate its abilities straight away. So the MVP for that is Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Though getting a Fiend Artisan back is also often a great hit, and getting a Deathrite Shaman back is often great. Even getting a Stitcher Supplier is often enough to get you going the next turn and win the game then. So how do you win the game? Yeah, as I said, Kervik, just a value card, not really involved in the combo. How do you win the game? So you have a Tyvar in play, giving all your creatures pseudo haste for their abilities. You have an Agatha's Soul Cauldron with a Priest of the Forgotten Gods under it. And you have a Forsaken Miner in the graveyard or in play, let's say in play. And then you also have, so you have some creatures. You have a creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. And you have 2 other creatures. Let's say they're, a Forsaken Miner and a Stitcher Supplier or something like that. And you have an Insidious Roots in play also, as the deck is named after. So we got the Tyvar, we got the Roots, we got some creatures, and we got the Soul Cauldron with the Priest under it. What we're going to do is activate our Priest, or whatever creature is acting as the Priest with the +1 counter on it. We're going to sacrifice our other 2 creatures, which is going to include a Forsaken Miner, and we're going to need a black mana as well to bring this guy back, right? So we do that, sacrifice 2 other creatures. One of them is the Forsaken Miner. The trigger goes on the stack. We pay a black, we bring Forsaken Miner back to the battlefield. That triggers Insidious Roots and gets us a plant. Then Priest's ability resolves. They sack a creature, lose 2 life. We get black, and draw a card. Now we have a new untapped plant from the Forsaken Miner thing that has a +1/+1 counter on it. So that is now a new Priest. So we now have our new Priest, which is the plant. We have our old tapped Priest, that was the previous thing that we activated, and we have the Forsaken Miner, which went to the battlefield and came back. That means we can do it all again with the new Priest, which is a plant. So we tap this plant, sack our old Priest and our Forsaken Miner again. We have the 2 black mana in our mana pool from the previous iteration of the loop, and we use that black mana once again to come back straight away from the graveyard because we're committing another crime. We end up again with resolving this ability. We get the Forsaken Miner back. We get a new untapped plant. We tap this new plant, sack the miner, and the old plant again. And this is a kill combo because each iteration of the loop, they're losing 2 life, we're gaining 2 mana and drawing a card, and they're sacking a creature. So that's basically how the deck wins. So in the previous video, I'd been through most of our sideboard guide. I was just making the flex slot, which I'll link in the video as we went, and explaining the matchups. So I'll just start going through these again. I won't go through the individual sideboard cards one by one because, they're pretty self-explanatory. Reading the card explains the card and all that good stuff. So most popular deck in the format is it Phoenix. I think this is a good matchup for us. Game 1, we should be winning a lot because we have 4 Deathrite Shaman, which just messes with them a lot. We have some Fatal Pushes, which are just good. And we have 3 Agatha's Soul Cauldrons, which again, just mess with them a lot. Their removal isn't that good because it doesn't exile. And while, they just have like they just need to kill Deathrite Shaman. This is like a must kill, and eventually we're going to get some other creatures down. We're going to get a Soul Cauldron down, give its ability, the Deathrite Shaman's ability, to other stuff. Usually they're only playing like 1 to 2 Spell Pierce these days. They're going to have a max of 3 Spell Pierce, so it's going to be hard for them if we play our Insidious Roots on the right turn, wherever it is, there it is, for them to counter it. And they just can't really do much. They don't kill us that fast. We interact favorably with their deck, and we're just going to kill them a lot of game ones. But even if we don't, after sideboard, our games are still pretty good. What I'm advising here is cut a Fiend Artisan. You can cut 2. Fiend Artisan's a pretty poopy card in general. You can see here I've been cutting it in a lot of matchups. But one nice thing about against Phoenix is their graveyard hate isn't very strong, and their removal maxes out at Lightning Axe, dealing 5 damage. So in the longer post-board games, Fiend Artisan can actually be a 6/6 or better, and can actually be a threatening board presence against them. Then again, they could board into some kind of Young Pyromancer thing and just be chump blocking the Fiend Artisan all day. So obviously that's not good if they're doing that. I'm taking out both the Kervek, the Punishers, just because I think like losing the 2 life is just too tough against Phoenix, and it plays into their removal too well. I just don't think the games play it in a way where we can spend 3 mana on this creature and then just have it Fiery Impulsed or Lightning Axed. It's just going to be game losing to lose that much tempo, as you might say. I don't know if people agree with that. And then Spell Pierce, which they probably will keep in because they need to deal with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, as well as Tyvar, as well as Insidious Roots. Those are all just great Spell Pierce targets in our land light deck. We only have 20 lands. On the play, I'm cutting 1, and the draw, I'm cutting 2. And then I'm bringing in a bunch of Thought Seizes and our last Fatal Push. It's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think we have to board that much. Wait, what is going on here? We're only taking out 4. Okay, let's just say take out both the Fiend Artisans here to make this match for the moment. No, wait. 5 and 6. Sorry. 1, 1. What is going on? We're taking out 1 too many card, are we? Out... 4, 5, 4. Oh no, sorry, it's div 0. I just can't read this thing, man. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I think this benefits from getting a couple of reps at the matchup, but I believe it's slightly favored for us, and you don't need to sideboard all that much. Rakdos Vampires, my thinking is they have Leyline of the Void, which is tough to deal with. Fiend Artisan is just not going to do much, I don't think. Bloodsoaked Champion is not going to do all that much. It's not going to be able to attack, and it's obviously terrible if they have Kalatas or Leyline of the Void, so just cut those as well. And then Kervik, I don't know, you could consider leaving this in, I suppose. I wouldn't hate it, but I just think they're going to be putting you under pressure. It's going to be, they're going to have Graveyard Hate again, so I don't want to rely on this card too much. It's expensive. And what I like bringing in is definitely the 4th Fatal Push, and we need to bring in a bunch of Thought Seizes to try and disrupt the combo, because we're just not beating a turn 3 Vein Ripper essentially ever. We can beat a Kalatas, and we can beat a Vein Ripper that's played later in the game, in my opinion, but on turn 3 we just can't, so we just need to disrupt it. This will also take, whatever removal they have to let us try and combo. And you might be interested in why I have like 1 Pick Your Poison in on the draw. I think this number is likely higher, but you need to know there are enough targets to bring in Pick Your Poison. I think if they have Leyline of the Void and Vein Ripper, that's not quite enough to justify bringing in this card. Again, maybe 1 on the draw here like I have. But for example, in the last round of the Swiss in the Super RCQ, I played against Vampires, and I knew their list because they had top 8'd the showcase the weekend before, and so I presume they would be playing the same list basically. And I saw they had Leyline of Sanctity in that list, as well as 4 Leyline of the Void and Vein Rippers. And I can't remember if they had Unlicensed First as well. I don't think they did. I think it was just Leylines. But seeing the Leyline of Sanctities as well, which the thing is, Leyline of Sanctity actually turns off your ability to win with Priest of the Forgotten Gods, because this targets the opponent when you use it. So if they have Leyline in play, you can't do that. So that was enough to spur me to like bring in copies of Pick Your Poison, and I actually brought in 2 on the play and 3 on the draw in the final round of that, and I used, I think, all 3 copies of the Pick Your Poison on the draw in that final game. they had, I don't think they actually brought in Leyline of Sanctity against me, but they had 2 Vein Rippers and 1 Leyline of the Void that I was able to kill with it. Or maybe it was a Fable, a Leyline, and a Vein Ripper. But I just needed it as insurance, because if they had decided to bring in Leyline of Sanctity, knowing that I had Thoughtseize and Priest was how I won the game, it just would have locked me out of the game, essentially. So even though they maybe didn't board it in, I felt like I still needed to bring it in. So I think Pick Your Poison is a consideration here based on how many sideboard cards they have that target it. But at baseline, it's probably not a card you want many of. Vampires, I think, is a bad matchup. I think they're sort of average and better. I think their average draws beat our average draws. I think their nut draws beat our nut draws. And I think our sort of above average draws maybe beat their above average draws, but I think most of the time they're winning. So if Rakdos Vampire is super popular in your meta, maybe this isn't the deck for you. On the other hand, if Niv to Light is everywhere, I think we kind of batter this deck, to be honest. Niv just has a really hard time dealing with a bunch of 2/1s and 2/2s for 1 mana and like Scrap Heap Scroungers that are just 3 power 2 mana. Their deck is clunky, their spells are expensive, and it's hard for them in the early game before they have access to Bring to Light and access to Omnat, to life gain and mana to really stabilize and get in the game. And I feel like you just run them over before they really do anything. Like if you've played a Slick Shot show-off deck against Niv, you kind of know what it's like as well. It's just they're just too clunky to set up. So game 1, I think you should win a decent amount of the time. Sideboarding, obviously we're taking out the Fatal Pushes. Fiend Artisan, just too slow, doesn't really do anything. Taking out 1 Karavik on the draw, just because I think the matches don't really play out like that, but I think on the play you'll get enough value from this card to make it worth it. And then on the play, yeah, I decided to take out a Priest. You could just take out a Karavik in both here. The reason I think you maybe take out a Priest is because I think on the play you can just run them over with aggro creatures more often, and Priest doesn't really play into that game plan as much. Whereas Karavik just rebuying a Thoughtseize or something like that is going to be better than having a Priest in your hand in those type of games. Whereas I think on the draw, you're less likely to win with an aggro draw, and you more likely want to combo. So I want access to all my Priests. Cutting 2 Tyvars here, just because it's kind of clunky. They can have a bunch of graveyard hate. It could be possible here that we cut fewer of these, and we maybe bring in 1 fewer Pick Your Poison. As you can see, sorry, I didn't mention yet, but the cards we're bringing in are Pick Your Poison and Thoughtseize. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if this was just -1/-1 on Tyvars, and then we just bring in 3 Pick Your Poisons. But like, this card just is not that impressive. A lot of the time they're exiling stuff from our graveyard. I did win against a Niv player who cast like 2 Deadly Cover-Ups and exiled 2 of my combo pieces, and I was still able to win just by beating them down with little dorks. So I think this matchup is great. Moving on to Mono Black Discard or Waste Not. I think this matchup is roughly even. I don't think it's as bad as Vampires is. In terms of sideboarding, cut all the Fatal Pushes. We don't care about Sheoldred. Kalatas is a bit of a pain in the ass, but who cares really? And then we have a Fiend Artisan coming out here on the draw. I think it's not going to be that effective. And I'm cutting 1 Tyvar on the play, just as a little bit of hedging against them having Leyline of the Void starts and stuff like that. Okay, and then on the sideboard, I'm just bringing in Pick Your Poisons against them. We have 2 Boseiju as well in the mana base to deal with Waste Not, but I think the only way they win games, honestly, is by resolving sort of Bank Busters, Unlicensed Hearses, and Waste Nots against you, and this card and Leyline of the Voids, and Pick Your Poison just does it all for 1 mana against all of those cards. So you can end up a little bit flooded here. I definitely in this matchup felt like I kind of had an extra Pick Your Poison stagnating in my hand a lot of the time. So maybe on the play even you want to just go 3 Pick Your Poisons, but I think you want to see the first copy so badly in sideboard games against this deck that you should just play 4 and just take your medicine if you draw too many of them. I think that's fine. So pretty decent matchup, I think. Against Gruul, this matchup is basically just a race, I believe. Slick Shot show-off decks are just very fast, very powerful. It basically relies on you having a Fatal Push at the right time, Fiend Artisan's obviously a bit slow, so that's what I decided to take out. But it's like the life gain from Deathrite Shaman can be relevant against their ground blockers. Stitcher Supplier, obviously, having a body like that is great. But if they have a flipped Kumano in play, you don't even get the dies trigger off this. It's getting exiled, so that's a bit annoying. And I feel like you basically just want to have like one relevant Fatal Push to deal with their Slick Shot or whatever their aggressive creature is that they try to put a Monstrous Rage on, and then you just want to try and combo them. So I'm not taking out any Tyvars or anything like that. I'm just cutting. I mean, it could even be 2 Fiend Artisans, but Fiend Artisan's not too bad in the matchup either. So I think we definitely want Fatal Push, and then I would bring in Haywire Mites if I saw they had like Unlicensed Hearses or something like that. I think Pick Your Poison you can't justify bringing in because it's rarely going to do very much against Slick Shot Show Off. You could bring in some Thoughtseizes. I think I did bring in 2 Thoughtseizes on the draw once. I might even say that here on the draw, like take out the second Fiend Artisan and bring that in. Kervik is kind of a funny one because like losing 2 life does suck, but getting to flashback a Fatal Push against them or something like that can just be backbreaking, or even just flashback a creature and get it into play. I think that's a good enough reason to keep him in, and 3/3 is a pretty big body. You know, it at least blocks the Swift Spears and the Kumano and stuff like that when they're not able to pump it when they're low on cards. I could see this being different for sure, though. But again, I think this matchup is basically just a flip, pretty 50-50. Being on the play, obviously, is very nice. Against Amalia, I think we do really nicely against this deck. I'm taking out Bloodsoaked Champions because it just doesn't attack very well into their creatures, like the Wild Growth Walker, the Amalia, 1 counter on it, and the Sentinel of whatever it's called, the 3/4, just can't attack into those things. And, you know, doesn't block, obviously. Fiend Artisan just sucks. Like you can just see across the board here. I just don't like this card. And Kervik, it's like, yeah, the matches just aren't really playing out to the extent where I think Kervik is going to be very good. And Tyvar, I feel like we're playing more of a control matchup, so we can cut 1 Tyvar, we'll find our 1 copy eventually, and then win the game when we cast it, is kind of how I feel. So we're taking out those cards, and we're bringing in the 4th Fatal Push, 2 Knight of Dusk Shadow. Obviously, this is the whole reason why this is in the deck. I mean, there's maybe more of an argument for Fiend Artisan because you can tutor it up here with the Fiend Artisan. So I could maybe see bringing that in. But I think on the draw, at least, I want 4 Thoughtseizes. Maybe on the play, you know what? Maybe let's add play draw here. Which I think it just duplicates across. It does, yeah. And we can say, okay, on the play, maybe we'll be more likely to do that. So, but again, do I want to keep 2 Fiend Artisans here? That just, yeah, I mean, and again, it's like, what else am I cutting? No, you know, I think we can just, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I think having access to that probably is pretty nice. So I think let's try, if we're having Fiend Artisan in the deck here, let's try 0 here, and then that means here we would, well, we have to find 2 other cuts because we definitely want all these cards, right? So yeah, cutting Tyvars. So maybe on the play we're cutting a 2nd Tyvar, and then we could also cut maybe... See, it's hard to find these cuts because like Soul Cauldron's very good for managing their graveyard. Deathrite Shaman obviously is a superstar managing their graveyard. Scrounger I never want to cut just because it's the king at making plants. Okay, I think I only have room here for 1 Fiend Artisan. Out 1/2, out 1/2. Yeah, okay, so that adds up, diff 0. So yeah, I think this is a good matchup. We play more of a control role, but we can manage their graveyard well as well. I think that's pretty good. Wait a second, no, I was looking at the wrong thing. What was I clicking here? Okay, that's fine. So yeah, here I was saying on the play, leave these guys in. So we need to find another card to cut here on the play. Sorry, let's just get confusing myself here. So yeah, I cut 2 Tyvar, cut that. We have to go -1. That's what I was saying. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Confusion is finished with. So we'll go 7 and 7. Good matchup. Mono red aggro, basically the same as Gruul. You can see the cards I'm sideboarding in here are a little bit different, but plays out relatively the same, to be honest. Like I'm bringing in Haywire Might just because they're more likely, I think, to have like something weird. Like they can have like Urabrask's Forge, they can have Unlicensed Hearse, the flipped Kumano again they're going to have, and I think the life gain is more relevant, and they're going to have more ground blockers maybe, or ground attackers maybe. And then we definitely want the fourth Fatal Push. With Kervik, we just can't take the life loss against Mono Red. And again, Tyvar, I think we can just go down a copy and play the one copy to win the game when we need to. No player draw differences here. I think this is roughly the same. I mean, the matchups are just so fast, it's kind of hard to tell if there's a big advantage involved. Against Lotus, I think this is a good matchup for us. I beat this a couple of times in the Swiss. Deathrite Shaman is not nothing game one. We're able to exile instants and sorceries from the graveyard to stop the Liar plan from giving them an easy win. Same with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. That kind of does some stuff. And then we do just have a pretty fast clock as well. So, we have a couple of Bus Ages to maybe kill a Thespian stage at the right time. So I think game one, not so bad for us. They are faster than us, but we have an adequate amount of interaction for that. So we're taking out Fatal Pushes because it doesn't do anything. We're taking out Fiend Artisans because they don't do anything. We're taking out one Priest because they're extremely creature light. So we can probably just find one by the time we want to combo off and win the game. And then Tyvar, again, we're going to be playing more of a controlling role against them. And when I'm bringing in our 4 Thoughtseizes, 2 Damping Spheres, obviously that's what it's in there for, and 1 Pick Your Poison. They don't have really many cards to pick your poison, but they can be bringing in stuff like temporary lockdowns and all this stuff. So this is mostly based on your opponent's list. Like Lotus players have sort of different lists that you got to see what they're bringing in and out. But this is what I would start with if it was just in the blind. Blue-white control, this matchup is just an absolute disaster. Sorry, I've moved the thing. So blue-white control is now here. It's a disaster, unwinnable. Cutting Fatal Pushes, Fiend Artisans, Kerviks, and a land just to try and be a bit faster, and just bringing in a bunch of Pick Your Poisons and Thoughtseizes. But this matchup is horrible. You can't win if your meta is full of Blue Eye Control. Stop watching this video and go play a Slick Shot Show Off deck instead. Against Izzet Soul, Bloodsoaked Champion is not attacking well, and we're not. They have a lot of 1/1s to block with, and we're not usually able to win a race with combat damage, so cut these guys. Fiend Artisans, just not doing very much again, pretty bad. Kervik, we can't really take the loss of life. And then on the draw, I'm cutting a tap land. On the play, I'm cutting a Tyvar. I don't know, I think you can swap these around if you don't like it. And then we're bringing in 2 Haywire Mites, obviously great to take out in Soul. Or you can exile like Darksteel Citadel with this, so they can't even put the Ensoul on it if this guy's out. You can also Agatha's Soul Cauldron. The Haywire Might ability is going to be great against this deck. And we want the last Fatal Push. I actually don't think Pick Your Poison is very good against this deck. Because they have too many artifact tokens to sacrifice. Their creature with flying, like you're not going to get Smuggler's Copter. It's always going to be a Spyglass Siren 1/1 that they're sacrificing. And then like making them sack an enchantment is the only decent thing against Ensoul, right? But I just think it's clunky. You can bring it in maybe based on their build. Like if you see that they're playing the Case of the Filched Falcons as well as in Souls, maybe you want this card. I'm not sure, but it just very much underperforms. So I'd much rather just have access to Thoughtseizes. Yeah. And that's the matchup. Again, I think this is probably a flip. I think maybe we're slightly favored. We're pretty good at chumping and staying out of Shrapnel Blast range, so I think that's the reason it's slightly favored for us. Against Quintorius, it's a race, but we can beat down as well as combo to beat them. I think this is pretty favored for us. Just putting any kind of pressure under Quintorius tends to make them fold. So we're just taking out Fiend Artisans because they're bad, and Fatal Pushes because they don't do anything. And then bringing in 4 Thoughtseize, and then I was kind of like, the last card is kind of whatever to bring in, but I said, okay, let's just, like we have a card we want to bring in because all our cards are bad, so let's bring in Damping Sphere. It's like, this isn't lights out against them, but it stops them going off like with only 5 mana available, they at least have to wait a turn or two. But the problem is that, like, if they do that, then they're able to just, like, they're not able to win, but they're able to make a bunch of Carnosaurs or something still. But, you know, this can probably be still a second copy, actually. I'm kind of thinking that now. I'm thinking we can, but the thing is, I don't want to cut Tyvar, and I don't want to cut Karavik. You know, I'm saying one copy. Maybe I'm totally wrong on this, and Damping Sphere is lights out against them. But in the post-board games, I've just found that the matches play out slower. They're playing their 6-drops, and they're not really trying to combo. And I would prefer to just have a more proactive plan against them. Maybe on the draw, you want the second Damping Sphere, but I'm not sure. Okay, so mono white humans. This is a pretty bad matchup. They're just running you over. We're cutting Bloodsoaked Champions because they don't attack into any of their creatures. They're just going to die. And then I have one of the Fiend Artisans as the other cut here. This is maybe something you should keep in just because it can be bigger than their board. But they have Rest in Peace. They have Containment Priest as well. So I think this card's just like not very good in the matchup. And then I'm just bringing in Fatal Push. And the two Haywire Mites are just to have answers to Rest in Peace, and as well to provide colorless blockers, like another color of blockers, so they can't brave the elements and just alpha you as easily. And it's a little bit of life gain. You know, you can trade with something or chump with something and give you time to combo. But bad matchup. Azorius Spirits. Game 1 I think is pretty bad, although you can still maybe race with your crappy dorks. But after that, we certainly don't want them. Cutting the Bloodsoaked Champions, cutting the bad Fiend Artisans. Obviously all their creatures are flyers, so it doesn't block anything. And I actually cut 2 Insidious Roots here. No, this should be Karavik the Punisher. This should not be Insidious Roots. There we go. And this is 7 and 7. Yeah, so we're bringing in 3 Thoughtseizes and 4 Pick Your Poisons. All their creatures are flying, essentially, so Pick Your Poisons, great. They're going to bring in Rest in Peace. They're going to bring in Wedding Announcement. Honestly, wouldn't even mind bringing in a Haywire Mite, maybe. But Thoughtseize is obviously very good against them as well. I could see the 4th Thoughtseize and maybe cutting, like, 1... I wouldn't even cut 1 Roots, though. That was definitely a misclick that I clicked Karavik. But I think this matchup is like a flip. I think the post-board games are better than pre-board for you, but I don't know. I think it's okay. You can pressure them as well. I think it's pretty close. Against Nykthos Ramp, played against this once in the Swiss and demolished them. Like, it was just a matter of, like, you just mulligan for Fatal Push and kill an elf and they just lose. It's basically the way it used to go. It's just the way it goes with any deck against mono green, except for now they don't have the ability to, like, get a Karn as like a Hail Mary thing. Post board, I'm cutting Bloodsoaked Champions. Just doesn't attack into their bigger creatures. Fiend Artisan just sucks. And Karavik the Punisher, I think it's probably actually not that bad. I don't know, but you can maybe keep this one. But then I was cutting 1 tap land just because I felt like you just want to be pretty fast against them. And, like, your opening hands are just going to have, like, ideally a Fatal Push and then hopefully, you know, a Thoughtseize, Damping Sphere. And you're just going to try and disrupt them, 1 piece of disruption, and then you're just going to try and combo, put them on the back foot. I think this is a very good matchup for us as well. So I'll have this Flexot GG linked in the video description. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and this is a super fun, sweet deck that I hope you guys enjoy playing. So leave me any comments if you disagree with any of the sideboard strategies. I'm happy to update the document if you guys provide good reasoning to why we should change some of these slots around. Thanks, and please give me a like and a subscribe. Peace.